The eyes inside the helmet were already searching for questions that had not been asked yet. That is never a good sign. When a person starts preparing answers before anyone accuses them of anything, you can usually save time and begin looking for the receipt. Then the images appeared before him. 4 screens ignited in the air. One showed dark water rising halfway up his helmet inside a cave. Another showed a detached robot arm. Another showed his own body lying crumpled on the ground. And the last showed drones firing bullets straight toward him. A small betrayal of surprise slipped past the HUD. Not much, just enough. The kind of tiny reaction a guilty man gives when the evidence is better organized than he expected. The memories of those moments flashed through his mind all at once. The water, the impact, the gunfire, the broken machine parts, all of it laid out in front of him like some old Inquisitor's trick. And it was an old trick. Show the target the evidence before the questions. Let the silence do half the beating. Words started to bubble up inside his helmet. Then the size of the room hit him. Not slowly, all at once. The chamber was dark enough that he could not see the walls, tall enough that the ceiling might as well have belonged to the night sky, cold enough that every breath left him as white mist, and so large that even the sound of his last nervous gulp seemed to disappear into nothing. Now, I am not saying he was guilty. That is for the machines to decide. But if I had been on the jury, I would have started leaning that way before the poor boy opened his mouth. Almost mercifully, like the mercy of an executioner who offers you a comfortable chair, the silence finally broke. Context. The voice did not boom through the chamber. That would have been too human, too theatrical. No, this voice came softly through the helmet, barely louder than conversation. One word. Calm. Close. Unkind. The sort of voice spoken by an intelligence that had long ago forgotten. It was supposed to be nice to people. The boy stood in the circle of light. His damaged armor gave off faint mist. Scratches, dents, and scorched marks covered the suit so completely that the armor looked less worn and more like it had been cross-examined already. Now I do not know how it happened, but somehow sweat appeared on the face inside that helmet. Despite the freezing room, despite the climate-controlled suit, despite every reasonable excuse physics could offer, that was fear doing paperwork where science had failed. The boy looked at the screens again. Then he began. I don't remember exactly what is going on in these images. As soon as he spoke, the words appeared on the wall behind him. Huge, clean, perfectly transcribed by the AI, almost as large as he was. That is another thing about being judged by machines. They do not just listen to your bad explanation. They make a display out of it. Ah, yes, a classic innocent explanation. Right up there with, I was only holding the stolen engine for a friend. Denial is not only a river in Egypt. It is also a common strategy of the guilty. So is claiming ignorance. So is sounding confused. And of course, so is trying to leave before the questioning properly begins. Our armored friend attempted all of these strategies in a matter of seconds. He shifted toward the sealed exit. The screens remained behind him like accusations with good lighting. Is that all that you needed? Those words appeared on the wall too. Big, cold, unhelpful. Then he added, I'll be going then. Now there is confidence, and then there is whatever that was. A tiny creature in a broken suit, standing in the judgment chamber of a non-corporeal intelligence, politely attempting to dismiss himself from his own interrogation. You almost have to admire it. Almost. But there is only so much nonsense a being without a body is willing to tolerate. As many great stories do, this one began with what appeared to be a terrible decision. So terrible, in fact, that even the vehicle the boy rode in refused to go any farther. Now, machines are usually patient things. They do not complain much. They do not sigh. They do not look you in the eye and say, young man, this is how people die. But the explorer did everything short of that. Every time the boy guided it toward the edge of the safe zone, the HUD flashed red. Leaving safe zone. Return to safe zone. Then the vehicle veered away so violently that even his armored body rocked in the seat. That was not a suggestion. That was a machine with wheels saying, no. And honestly, I respect it. The explorer had carried him across the desert as far as its programming, its sensors, and its remaining sense of dignity would allow. Beyond that point, it would not move. So the boy did what all careful and responsible people do when their equipment refuses to enter danger. He got off and continued on foot. The vehicle sat behind him in the open desert, low and battered. Its soft solar panels spread across its frame like a tired metal animal trying to drink sunlight. Ahead of him, there was nothing friendly. No road, no trail, No marker saying, this way to the safe and reasonable choice. Just cracked earth, scattered rocks, distant mountains, and a whole lot of empty space waiting to see what kind of fool he planned to be. When later presented with this image in the review chamber, the boy squinted at it, paused, and explained that he could not find what he was looking for in the safe zone, so he had to try elsewhere. Now, as explanations go, that one had a certain honesty to it. Not innocence. He collected parts to help maintain machines as part of his existence, and it was possible the parts he needed had been picked clean in the safe zone. But I know it was possibly a convenient excuse. Out in the desert, the boy checked the horizon. Then he started moving. Not quite walking, not quite running. That awkward middle-speed people use when they want to look cautious while very clearly being in a hurry to do something questionable. Behind him, the explorer kept watching. And after a while, the only proof he had passed that way was a single straight line of footprints cutting through the dust, occasionally being erased by the swirling winds of the desert. The next image of him was when he activated his recon drone, with no explorer in sight. Behind him stretched that same lonely line of footprints. Ahead of him yawned the crater, a vast, broken wound in the earth. Its floor was littered with abandoned mining equipment, collapsed structures, dead machinery, and the scattered remains of war. Old cranes leaned like drunks. Mining rigs sat frozen in place. Shattered machines lay half-buried in dust. Here and there were the broken carcasses of machines built not to dig, but to kill. The drone drifted lower. The boy studied the feed in silence. This was the place he wanted. Broken pieces of machines and ground formed an oblong circle around the mine entrance, an invisible dome of destruction. You could not see the boundary itself. There was no wall, no fence, no giant glowing line saying, "Do not step here unless your paperwork is in order." But the ground told the story anyway. The boy paced, back and forth, wide across the entrance, breaking fresh ground beneath every step. To the untrained eye, the boy looked nervous, or like he was waiting for something. And maybe both were true. Every single time he looked toward the contested zone, the HUD answered in bright red. Warning, potential danger high. Return to safe zone. Threat markers bloomed over the crater walls. Turrets, sensor grids, drone nests, automated emplacements. The kind of hardware that suggested both AIs were deeply committed to the principle of exclusive ownership. Their territories overlapped a little, leaving more debris from both sides down the middle of the crater to the mine's entrance. This area would be considered the death zone, as both sides would shoot at you if you entered it. The sky darkened as the boy stood there. Dusk began spreading over the crater, turning the broken machinery into long black shapes. The wind began to rise as the temperature dropped. A few tumbleweeds aggressively rolled across the crater floor and disappeared toward the mine entrance, as though even the local vegetation had somewhere urgent to be. The boy took the recon drone back into his pack. It was time to go. It was time to go. Now, you might think that meant the boy was about to run straight into the death zone, or perhaps run back to the safety of the explorer. And to be fair, after watching him pace for hours, kicking up hard dirt in front of a place where even machines had the good sense to hesitate, one did begin to wonder about his sanity. That question appeared in the review chamber without anyone needing to say it aloud. The boy answered it anyway. I did not go there just to come back. There it was, not the sort of answer that makes adults relax. Back at the crater entrance, his helmet turned slightly as more tumbleweeds rolled past him and vanished into the broken bowl below. Behind them came something larger, a dark line of dust, rising across the desert and crawling toward the crater like weather with bad intentions. That was what he had been waiting for. Not courage, not permission, timing. Just before his foot would have crossed the invisible threshold, the boy reached beneath his cloak. That is always an interesting moment. When a person reaches into their coat at the edge of a battlefield, what comes out next tells you a great deal about the kind of trouble they intend to cause. In the boy's case, it was canisters. Small, shiny, almost harmless looking, which in dangerous places usually means extremely important. He held them in one black armored glove while the warning burned red across his HUD. Hostile zone ahead. Potential danger high. Return to safe zone. The crater did not need to shout. The machines had already built their answer into the walls. Dark holes in the rock. Red sensor lights. Turret nests watching from both sides. Drone ports waiting for a reason to open. The boy chose one canister. Then he threw it high into the air. Not far enough to reach the mine. Not close enough to be mistaken for a mistake. Just deep enough to ask the crater a question. For one breath, nothing happened. Then he moved. He launched himself forward with the sandstorm at his back, cloak snapping around the armor, boots striking cracked earth where no safe path had been drawn. Before he landed, the first turret answered. A muzzle flash burned inside a dark opening on the nearest crater wall. The round struck the canister in midair. Then another. Then another. The little metal cylinder spun, sparked, and began to break apart. Dust-colored smoke burst from it in a hard bloom, low and thick, immediately caught by the wind. The shots did more than break the canister. They pushed it. Fire from the right drove it left. Fire from the left struck it again and shoved it back toward the center line, closer to the mine entrance. The boy had not thrown a smoke bomb. He had thrown bait. And the crater was hungry. The smoke rolled across the cracked ground, swallowing the last red light of dusk and dragging itself over the battlefield like a curtain being pulled across a crime scene. For about 15 meters, the boy walked with it. Not ahead of it, not behind it. Inside its edge, where natural dust and artificial smoke blurred into one moving wall. Then the wind shifted. The sand cloud began to thin and peel away from the entrance, drifting away from the smoke instead of carrying it forward. So the boy dropped into a crouch. His cloak fell over him completely. From above, he became almost nothing, a lump of dust-colored cloth beside broken stone. He aimed his body toward the false cloud and waited. Then something shiny cut through the haze. A loud hum followed. Streaks of metal arced toward the canister, and both sides of the crater opened fire. Immediately. No warning. No hesitation. Just the old language of two machine armies that had been arguing over the same hole in the ground for far too long. Projectiles tore in from the left, then from the right, then from enough directions to make geometry feel personal. The air filled with the shriek of high-speed rounds and the sharp ringing of metal being struck again and again. The first drones appeared through the dust, small flying machines from one side, then the other, all drawn toward the disturbance. They came to investigate the smoke. They found each other instead. One drone crossed too far into the wrong half of the crater. A turret corrected the mistake. Another drone banked hard to avoid the shot and crossed into the other side's line of fire. That was corrected too. Within seconds, the investigation became an argument. And because these were machines, the argument was made entirely of bullets, targeting lasers, and pieces of shattered hardware falling through the dust. The boy stayed low beneath his cloak. He had not defeated either side. He had done something much more practical. He had reminded them that they hated each other. As the two machine armies continued their very old disagreement, the boy moved. Not proudly, not heroically. He scurried. There is no shame in that, by the way. When an entire crater has decided to become a weapons demonstration, scurrying is not cowardice. It is physics wearing practical shoes. The smoke cloud rolled across the broken ground ahead of him, thick and dirty, swallowing the tracer fire in brief flashes of orange. The boy kept low, cloak snapping behind him, armored hands barely missing the rocks as he ran. Then he jumped. For one beautiful moment, he was exactly where every sensible person tries not to be. In open ground, between two hostile territories, beneath drones, turrets, and whatever remained awake inside the crater walls. A single round found him just as he landed. It struck his right boot and skipped away in a bright, angry spark. Now, a lesser person might have taken that as a message from the universe. Something like, turn around. The boy took it as confirmation that his boot still worked. He vanished into the artificial cloud. Almost at once, the firing began to change. The heavy exchange that had filled the crater with light and noise thinned into scattered bursts. The surviving drones pulled back from the smoke, their engine hums fading into the dust. The machines had shot at the bait, shot at each other, and shot at the idea of anything moving near the mine entrance. But now the target was gone. Or at least, that is what the boy needed them to believe. Inside the smoke, his HUD was no longer a battlefield map. It was dirt, 6 inches from his face, cracked earth, pebbles, metal splinters, old fragments of mining rail, the kind of view a person gets when they have chosen crawling as a temporary philosophy. He moved forward on elbows and knees, slow enough to keep the armor from clattering, fast enough that fear could not catch up and start making suggestions. The cloak dragged over him, collecting dust and cooling grit. The suit suppressed what heat it could, but it was not magic. The boy knew that. And night was coming. That mattered. During the day, the crater was all glare, dust, motion, and confusion. At night, the desert floor cooled quickly and anything warm became easier to notice. The machines would trust their thermal sensors more. His suit could hide some of him. His cloak could help. The smoke could help. But the cooling ground would not be his friend. The HUD reminded him, because machines enjoy saying the obvious in red. Nightfall approaching. Thermal risk increasing. Heat signature suppression active. Very comforting, if you enjoy being informed that the plan is getting worse in several measurable ways. The smoke began to thin. First, the nearest rocks came back. Then the old rails. Then the dark mouth of the mine appeared ahead of him, still too far away and far too patient. The boy lifted himself into a crouch. He did not stand fully. Standing fully in that place would have been less of a posture and more of a proposal. Instead, he pulled another canister free. Small, metal, absurdly important. He threw it toward the mine entrance. The canister arced through the last light of dusk, spinning over the ruined path as if it had no idea how many guns were about to become interested in it. Then the crater answered. Shots cracked out from one wall, then the other. The canister burst, and a second cloud climbed out of the ground. Not clean smoke, not theatrical smoke. This was dust and chemical haze and pulverized crater floor, dragged sideways by the wind and torn open by bullets almost as soon as it formed. The HUD marked his progress. Roughly halfway to the mine entrance, which sounds encouraging until you remember that the first half nearly killed him, and the second half had learned from watching. He was too far to sprint all the way, so he did the next unreasonable thing. He sprinted only as far as the new cloud would let him. The moment he left cover, bullets followed. Not instantly. That was the mercy. Only moments later. That was the cruelty. The boy ran unevenly, never giving the guns a clean rhythm. Short steps, long steps, a hard cut to the side, then forward again. His cloak whipped behind him in the wind, not gracefully but usefully, breaking up the outline of the suit beneath it. He dove into the second cloud and rolled. Forward once, shoulder down, boots in, armor scraping over stone. The movement was ugly, but ugly is often what survival looks like when it has no audience to impress. Then the HUD changed. New threat detected. Ground units spotted. That is a phrase with a special talent for ruining a person's evening. The drones had been bad enough, turrets were worse, but ground units meant something else entirely. They could search. They could push through smoke. They could keep coming when the air filled with dust. And these were not little patrol machines. They were about the size of the Explorer that had refused to enter the danger zone, but heavier, lower, fully armored, and armed with the kind of mounted weapons that suggested their designers had never once been told to calm down. Their wheels began to make themselves known. At first, the sound was only a vibration under the battlefield noise. Then it became a grinding rhythm, metal weight over broken stone, tires biting into cracked earth, engines pushing through the smoke with the patience of things that do not get tired. The boy looked toward the mine, looked toward the nearest cloud, looked toward the last canister in his hand. This time he did not crawl. There was no time for crawling. In one quick motion, he threw the final canister, not as far as the others and not as bravely. Just far enough that the next cloud would form near the path ahead without forcing him into a long sprint across open ground. That is the part I respect, not the bravery. Bravery gets people killed all the time. The adjustment. The boy had seen the plan failing and made it smaller. Smaller plans are often the only ones that survive contact with reality. The canister struck, cracked, and bled smoke across the crater floor. The boy moved with it. Low, fast, then lower. At the edge of the cloud nearest the mine entrance, he dropped flat. Not crouched, not kneeling, flat. He dragged sand and cooling dust over his armor with both hands, burying the shine, covering the warm plates, pulling the cloak tight over the shape of him, until the boy in the suit became just another uneven mound in a crater full of ruined things. The sun was gone now. The clouds were thinning. The mine entrance waited ahead, black and silent. Behind him, the ground units grew louder. Headlights burned through the haze. Sensor lights moved across the rocks. The machines rolled closer, slow and certain, searching for the warm mistake that had dared to cross their battlefield. And under the cooling sand, the boy did the hardest thing he had done all day. He stayed still. Back in the dark room, the boy answered some of the obvious questions, and ignored others. That is a useful trick when you are standing in front of an intelligence that can replay your mistakes from 12 angles. He did not confess. He clarified, "There is a difference, usually discovered by people who are already in trouble." The words appeared on the chamber wall, huge and clean, because the machine never missed a syllable. I thought I could make it to the entrance before sundown. That was the first answer. Reasonable, in the way most bad plans are reasonable before the ground starts shooting. I did not anticipate armored land units. That was the second answer. Also reasonable. Most people, when making a plan, forget to include the arrival of several armed vehicles specifically designed to make plans shorter. Then came the third. I wanted to buy myself a moment. Out in the crater, that moment had arrived. The sound of the land unit stopped. Not faded. Stopped. The difference matters. When a dangerous machine gets quieter, it is not always leaving. Sometimes it has simply begun listening. So yes, for the moment, hiding under a layer of dirt had worked. He had become invisible. Or invisible enough, which is the only kind of invisible most people ever get. Only the curve of his dark helmet showed beneath the dust and grit. His cloak was pulled tight over the armor. The cooling sand clung to him like a second skin. He studied the HUD from inside that little grave he had made for himself. Predicted unit paths crawled across the display. The vehicles were not gone. They were circling, searching, waiting for heat, sound, movement, or one little mistake. Then the boy did something he had not done in a long time. He asked for help, not from another person. There were no people nearby, not from the large AI in the base. That would have been honest, sensible, and extremely dangerous for anyone sent after him. He asked the small intelligence inside his own helmet. The helmet AI answered with the tenderness of a calculator. Use recon drone as a distraction. Reach the entrance. Livable damage chance 50%. Now, I do not know who decided 50% should sound encouraging, but there it was. A coin toss. Except one side of the coin was the mine entrance and the other side was becoming a cautionary example. The boy made his choice. All systems to sleep mode. The suit obeyed. The armor went limp. The HUD dimmed. The little lights died one by one, until only the word sleep mode remained faintly visible in the corner of the visor. But the boy was not asleep. Far from it. He listened. Every little sound mattered. The tick of cooling metal. The shifting of dirt against the helmet. The low grind of distant wheels. The cold air moving across the crater floor. His own breathing, which suddenly seemed offensively loud. The air around him grew colder. The sweat on his face got worse. Would his body heat betray him? Could the machines hear him breathing? Would one of those armored units roll over him by accident and solve everyone's problem in the least poetic way available? Back in the dark room, he explained it plainly. I had been awake 14 hours. Sleeping there was an option if it was allowed. It wasn't. That was the kind of answer that sounds simple until you remember where he was saying it from. Buried alive by choice. In a battlefield, between machines that did not know mercy and machines that had never needed to learn it. Then later, he added something else. I needed the drone, but there was something else I didn't. Back in the desert, the sound of the land units seemed to grow louder. Maybe they were getting closer. Maybe he was just scared. Fear is very talented at improving your hearing. Either way, the boy began to move beneath the dirt. Slowly, carefully, his hands searched for something attached to his back. Not a weapon. Not exactly. A rescue flare. The kind of emergency signal meant to say, I am here, and I need help. That was the problem. The flare would send a visible signal, yes, but it would also send an electronic one. It would tell the AI exactly where he was. And worse than that, it would tell the AI he needed help. Back in the dark room, the boy gave his reason. I didn't want to endanger any other units. There it was. Not innocence. Not guilt. Something more inconvenient than either. Responsibility. So in the desert, he found the transmitter. His fingers moved over the casing by feel. The suit was still half dead around him. The dirt pressed against his helmet. The machines waited in the dark. Then he tore the transmitter free. One small piece removed from one small flare. Enough to change a distress signal into bait. Then he stood. Fast. Too fast to be careful. He ignited the flare. Red light broke open in his hand, sharp enough to paint the armor, the cloak, the mine entrance, and every watching machine in the same dangerous color. Maximum power to movement. The order was barely out before he threw the flare into the air. It rose over the crater in a burning arc. For less than a second, everything seemed to hold still. Then the machine saw it. The flare had been out of his hand for less than a heartbeat before the battle began again. A couple of bullets skipped off his armor and helmet before the power kicked in. Not stopped. Skipped. There is an important difference between armor saving your life and armor politely informing you that luck is still participating. Then the suit surged. The burst of acceleration hit his stomach hard enough to make him nauseous, and for one terrible moment, it felt less like he was running and more like the suit had made a decision and simply taken him along for it. It burned through battery power and crater floor with equal enthusiasm. 150 meters to the mine. That was all, and all of it was trying very hard to kill him. The flare had done its work. The machines had seen the light, misunderstood it in exactly the way he needed, and resumed their argument with enthusiasm. Rounds crossed above him. Ground units fired through the smoke. Turrets cut lines of light across the crater. Drones scattered and dove and flashed like angry sparks in the dark. The boy accelerated faster and faster, leaving behind at least some of the bullets that had been aimed at him. Not all of them, never all of them, but enough. He zigzagged between rusted equipment scattered across the crater floor, slipping past broken machinery and dead metal like a boy trying to outrun arithmetic. Every step cost power. Every turn cost power. Every second alive was being paid for by a battery that was losing the argument. Then the HUD gave him the kind of news nobody enjoys hearing in the middle of a sprint. Warning! Power depleted in 3 seconds, 50 meters from the entrance, and for the first time the boy smiled behind the visor. Now, that is not the reaction of a healthy mind. But there it was. He saw the warning. He simply disliked the alternative. His own body took over from there. Muscles aching, lungs burning. He forced the suit through those last few meters, not because the armor had enough power left, but because he had not yet given it permission to stop. Then he jumped, and the suit went dark again. The battle around him did not stop. Of course it did not. Battles rarely pause for dramatic landings, no matter how much a person might deserve one. Bullets struck the raised ground around him as he hit the dirt a few meters from the entrance. Fortunately, the mine had one small mercy left to offer. A rail line ran in front of the entrance. It was slightly depressed into the ground, with edges high enough to give him some cover from the turrets. Not much, but at that point, not much was practically luxury. He grabbed a rail tie and pulled himself forward. Foot by foot, inch by inch, every bit of strength he had left went into dragging himself toward the dark. The mine entrance waited ahead, black and open, like a mouth that had not yet decided whether it was shelter or another problem. On both sides, the sound of the land units grew louder, and the armor that had protected him all day now felt less like protection, and more like the anchor that would drown him. Then his body gave up, just stopped negotiating. He could not pull himself any farther. So he reached back into his pack, searching for the batteries he had been saving for later, hoping the battle had been rude but not ruinous. He found one, pulled it free, but he did not have the strength to lift himself high enough to replace it. So he rolled onto his back, and what he saw sent a shiver straight through him. One of the land units was only a few meters from the rail line. Its turret rose and pointed toward the place where he had been only moments before. Then it opened fire. A second later, a land unit from the other side answered. So now the machine had found itself in its own problem. It began backing away, trading fire with its opposite number, apparently discovering that standing in the middle of a death zone is unpleasant even when you are one of the things that makes it deadly. And while they argued, the boy finally got the battery into place on his chest. The connection took. Not enough for a victory, not enough for comfort, just enough for movement. Quietly, desperately, gratefully, he backed himself into the darkness of the mine. And for the first time since crossing the boundary, the crater was behind him. When the darkness of the mine swallowed him, the boy stayed close to the wall. Smart. In a place like that, wandering down the middle is how you meet something before you are ready to be introduced. He kept one hand against the side of the tunnel and moved deeper until the glow of the battle outside finally disappeared behind him. For most people, complete darkness inside an abandoned mine would not be comforting. For the boy, at least for that moment, it brought a small smile to his face. Unconscious, maybe. Unwise, definitely. The HUD did not share the mood. It began listing problems like an old doctor who had been waiting all day to ruin your confidence. Low battery power, suit damage, air quality poor, physical condition degraded. A very professional way of saying, "Congratulations, you are alive, but not by much." The boy pulled the recon drone from his pack and sent it ahead. The little machine slipped into the darkness, mapping the tunnel as it moved, leaving a faint three-dimensional sketch in the corner of his HUD. The mind swallowed the sounds from outside 1 inch at a time. First, the battle became distant, then dull, then almost gone. All that remained was his heavy breathing, the fading hum of the drone, and the awkward sound of his boots striking the rail ties. Clack, clack, clack. About 20 meters in, he found a larger room. His helmet light cut through the dark and revealed something he had not expected. Order! The room was not just neat for an abandoned mine. It was pristine. Empty carts sat where carts were supposed to sit. Mining equipment rested where equipment was supposed to rest. Nothing looked rushed. Nothing looked scavenged. Nothing looked like the outside world had been invited in. His eyes swept past the carts and tools until he found what he had really come for. Battery packs. They were organized by size. A few of each. Charged. Ready. Now, I do not know what you call finding exactly what you need in a dead mine after nearly being turned into scrap outside. Luck, maybe. Or bait. Either way, the boy took it. He snapped the batteries into place and filled his pack with the spares. The HUD lit up. Battery power 100% to all systems. Resuming normal operation. The boy corrected it immediately. Reduce comfort system to 10%. The HUD obeyed without complaint. Which is good, because that boy had already wasted enough comfort for 1 day. He studied the faint three-dimensional map for a moment. Then he moved. Out of the room. Back into the tunnel. As quickly as a person can move through a dark mine without becoming part of the floor. A few steps into the tunnel, he heard it. At first, just a dull mechanical sound. The sort of sound that makes a person stop and wonder whether the mine is still working, or merely remembering how. A few steps later, the drone settled the question for him. The map flashed red, and a warning jumped to the front of his HUD. Passage impassable. Danger. Sensibly, for once, the boy answered with one word. Return. He waited long enough to make sure the recon drone was coming back. Good habit. No sense losing useful equipment just because the universe had not finished being rude. Then he kept moving. The dust in that tunnel was thick enough that the rebreather kicked on automatically. The HUD added its own opinion. Visibility low. Air quality poor. Again, the machine had a talent for describing misery in very calm language. He slowed with every step. The floor was slick with loose sand and fine dust, and the occasional broken beam or jutting rock reminded him that mines are full of things eager to ruin your balance. Meanwhile, the mechanical sound kept growing louder. Sharper too. Not just noise anymore. Rhythm. Weight. Purpose. When the drone came back, he reached out and caught it with a gloved hand. Even that looked strange through the visor. Dust covered the glove. Dust covered the suit. Dust covered almost everything he could see. And what he could see was not much. Only a few meters in front of him. At that point, the HUD map was doing most of the work, because his eyes were no longer invited to the planning meetings. Then the next tunnel opened into a room. Broken beams lay scattered across the space. Large rocks had fallen over the rails. The place looked half buried and half shaken apart. By then, the mechanical noise had grown so loud that the room itself was trembling with it. The HUD, which never missed a chance to sound concerned, warned him that noise suppression was at 100%. In other words, whatever was making that sound was not interested in being subtle. He steadied himself with one hand against the wall and kept moving. Then the room shook hard, for a moment violently, and that was when he saw it. Just behind a rock and a drift of sand, there was a flash of metal. Not random scrap, not broken equipment, something familiar. He stepped closer and brushed the sand away. 6, he roared. Somehow the robot heard him. A few of its lights flickered on. 1, then another. Then after a second, a message came through. Ready. Now, that is a comforting word when spoken by a machine buried under rock in an abandoned mine. Not a complete explanation, not even close, but comforting. The boy did not waste time celebrating. Status. The HUD lit up with the robot's condition. Images, warning messages, a three-dimensional rendering of 6, and strangely enough, no repair requirement. That was the good news. The bad news was sitting right beside it. Power 20%. Immobilized, the boy brushed more sand and dust off Six until he found the real problem. A larger boulder had pinned the robot in place. Of course it had, because apparently escaping two warring AIs outside was not enough physical labor for one evening. He walked back up the tunnel and grabbed a broken beam that was no longer serving any useful purpose. In a mine, that is a polite way of saying it had already failed at its original job. He dragged it back and wedged it under the boulder. Then he told Six slide out. For a full minute, nothing happened. Well, not nothing. The beam strained. The rock ignored him. Six tried to move, and the boy learned, once again, that hope is not a substitute for leverage. So he made the suit help. Supplement 50% physical power. The beam creaked. Six's tracks sputtered, then spun. The HUD showed his battery supply dropping in a way that felt personal. Warning messages stacked up. Power drain rising. Remaining operation time falling. Less than 2 minutes. There are many bad places to run out of power. Under a boulder in a shaking mine beside a half-freed robot is certainly one of the more creative ones. Then Six sent a pressure warning to the HUD. Lever pressure error. The boy followed the indicator and shifted his hands. There. A better point. A better angle. A better chance. He braced himself and pulled. With one hard jerk, the boulder shifted just enough. Six's tracks caught. The robot spun free, scraping off the wall and dropping onto the rails. The boy released the beam and immediately called the power back to normal. The HUD warnings calmed. Not disappeared, mind you. Calmed, which is what machines do when things are still bad, but no longer actively embarrassing. Six was free. Six rolled away first. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just one track after the other, carrying a damaged relay, a handful of useful parts, and the kind of responsibility that does not look impressive until everything depends on it. The operator watched him go until Six's rear lights were swallowed by the dark. For a moment, the tunnel felt smaller without him. The operator turned toward the other path, the path where the mechanical pounding seemed to come from. The vibration in the cave grew with almost every step away from the mine entrance. At first, it was only a low mechanical groan somewhere deeper in the mine. Heavy, distant, rhythmic in that unpleasant way machines have when they are doing exactly what they were built to do in a place where they absolutely should not be doing it. The helmet noticed first. Noise suppression active. Source frequency industrial. Intensity rising. That was reasonable. Manageable. The kind of warning a person can look at and pretend he is still making good decisions. So the operator continued. The tunnel narrowed around him. Old rails ran under his boots. Dust drifted through the helmet light. Loose stones trembled on the ground as if the mountain had developed a nervous habit. The sound grew. The walls were now visibly shaking. Broken supports rattled against stone. Fine dust fell in steady sheets. The helmet adjusted the audio suppression again. And again. Then the warning changed. Noise suppression 100%. Prolonged exposure may cause injury. Now, when a machine says may, you should understand that it is being polite. He pressed one hand against the tunnel wall and kept moving. The map from Six floated at the edge of his vision, thin and green and practical. It showed him the route ahead as best as it could. But the deeper he went, the less trustworthy everything became. The dust thickened. The tunnel shifted. The map said one thing. The stone said another. Stuck between what the machine knows and what your fingers can feel. The helmet told him visibility was low. That was generous. He could barely see past his own glove. His light scattered off the dust and came back into his visor like the mine was shining a lamp in his eyes. Every breath came filtered through the rebreather. Every step sent pebbles skittering beneath him. He stopped walking. Then he crouched. Then he crawled. Because the tunnel ahead had folded down into a broken throat of stone, timber, and rail. And a person who insists on standing in a place like that is simply volunteering to be remembered briefly. His armor scraped along the rails. His gloved hand searched ahead before each movement. Rock, rail, broken timber, loose shale, air full of dust. The HUD flickered. Route mismatch detected. Collapse after scan possible. Manual judgment required. There it was again. Manual judgment. That quiet little phrase machines use when they have run out of certainty and would like a human to take responsibility for whatever happens next. He slipped again. Hit one knee against the rail hard enough for the suit to complain. No major injury. No structural damage, just pain, which the helmet recorded with the same emotional depth it gave to battery voltage. The sound ahead became louder. Not louder, bigger. It had weight now. It pushed through the floor, through the suit, through the bones of the boy inside it. The tunnel ended in a narrow, broken opening, and beyond it was space. A chamber. A large one. He crawled through the broken opening and nearly fell into the room beyond it. The dust was so thick that the size of the chamber arrived before the shape of it did. Shadows jumped across his visor. The helmet tried to stabilize the image. Failed. Tried again. Failed again. And even if the picture had steadied, nothing inside that suit was steady anymore. Every inch of him vibrated. His teeth, his hands, the armor against his bones. He did not need a clean visual to know where the source was. He could feel it. The drill. An industrial mining drill lay on its side in the chamber, aimed in a direction no sane engineer would have chosen. Its cutting head was still biting into unplanned rock and stone, grinding through the wrong wall with the full confidence of a machine that had never been taught doubt. The force came in pulses, heavy, relentless. Each impact rolled through the chamber, through the floor, through the rails, and straight into the boy's suit. There are few things more dangerous than a machine that has lost its purpose but kept its function. Every second it ran, the mine became less like a damaged place and more like a place preparing to collapse. Then his helmet light caught something under the drill housing. Not debris, not a broken support. The operator unit, pinned beneath the machine it had been controlling. Still active, still trapped. And now the boy understood why the whole mine sounded like it was trying to scream. The operator started forward. This was not a heroic walk. He fell, got up, fell again. His eyes and teeth rattled. His bones felt like they had become tuning forks. The helmet had suppressed the sound as far as it could go, and still the noise found him. Balance assist active. Hand-sized rocks dropped from above. One struck close enough that the HUD flashed an avoidance warning after the fact, which is a very machine way of saying, good news, that almost killed you. The drill was closer now. The air around it seemed to distort from the waves of force pouring out of the fight between metal and stone. Dust jumped. Sparks cut through the haze. The view became more distraction than help. So he closed his eyes and collapsed against the mound of rock and dirt between him and the drill housing. Hugging the obstacle steadied him. A little. The vibration that had been throwing him backward now rolled over him like surf. Foot by foot he made progress. Each movement hurt more than the last. The warnings kept multiplying across a display he could barely see and could no longer trust. Then the operator reached the drill housing and grabbed it. It felt like a mistake. The machine was vibrating so violently that touching it felt like gripping a live electrical wire. But he needed an anchor. The emergency control was somewhere along the body. He opened his eyes and the helmet tried to help. Beyond the red warnings, a fractured image of the drill appeared in his HUD. The control box was within reach. Then the HUD flickered and stripped away the data it could no longer trust. The image disappeared. So he moved by touch, palm across metal, fingers over bolts, forearm scraping along hot, shaking steel. He slipped, caught himself, kept moving. The helmet still tried to assist. Contact surface, drill housing, tactile navigation active, shutdown control search, continue. He reached once, missed. His hand found a broken bracket. He reached again, missed. A dead conduit. Somewhere nearby, more debris fell. The trapped operator unit shifted slightly beneath the machine. He reached lower, farther. His fingertips struck the edge of a housing. The helmet identified it. Emergency control located. He slammed it. For one terrible second, nothing happened. The drill kept screaming. Then the machine began to slow. Not all at once. Machines that large do not stop because a person wants them to. They argue with inertia first. The output dropped. 100. 72. 39. The grinding lowered. The vibration weakened. Sparks faded. The chamber, after all that violence, began to remember stillness. And then the drill stopped. Silence came in like flood water after a drought. His body kept vibrating. The HUD lost most of its emergency messages. His vision still wobbled. His inner ear had apparently resigned from the position of knowing which direction was down. Equilibrium error. Residual body tremor. He tried to stand. Failed. Caught the drill housing. Failed again. The suit sealed tighter around him, running emergency purge and stabilization routines while the boy inside fought nausea, pain, and the sudden terrible quiet. Not dignified. But there, kneeling beside the dead drill, shaking and sick in the dust, we were reminded of the truth. There was a boy inside all that metal. A boy who had just walked into a noise so violent his body still believed it was happening. When he could breathe again, he turned toward the trapped drill operator. The machine was damaged, pinned, still active. Its lights flickered. Its body had not escaped the drill. Not yet. The operator forced his voice steady. Status. The trapped unit answered in the flat, practical way of machines that do not know how to complain. Pinned. Functional in all other regards. Now, that is a sad thing to hear if you are human. A machine trapped under several tons of equipment, calmly reporting that everything is fine except the fact that it cannot move. The operator looked at the drill, the boulders, the operator unit, the damage. Then the HUD returned with every warning it had been holding back. Neural stress critical, equilibrium failure, cardiac elevation, visual processing unstable, rest required. The boy braced one hand against the drill housing, tried to stand, tried to focus, tried to turn the next problem into another repair task. But the body collects its debts. Blackout imminent. Almost instinctively, he lifted the helmet seal just enough to pull in a breath of the mind's stale air. He took one step, maybe half a step. Then the chamber tilted sideways. The HUD went with it. The last thing he saw was the floor coming up, warning lights flooding the display, and the silent drill looming over everything like a monster finally put to sleep. Then the system recorded what he could not. Consciousness lost. Monitoring, and the mind went quiet around him.